It's Thursday, 7 November. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. Vice President Kamala Harris has officially conceded the 2024 presidential election, reaching out to President-elect Donald Trump to congratulate him on his victory. We have the latest updates on this significant moment in American history. Later in the show, international reactions to Tuesday's results keep pouring in, with Russia hinting at a potential, quote, reset in relations with the United States following Trump's victory. Plus, protests erupt across Israel following Prime Minister Netanyahu's dismissal of Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. We'll cover the unrest and take a look at Gallant's replacement, known as the Bulldozer. And in today's Back of the Brief, the Mexican Navy, get this, intercepts a massive 3.6-ton cocaine haul aboard a narco sub, spotted 153 miles off Acapulco's coast. We'll share the full story. 3.6 tons of coke, that's a lot of gear. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. After an historic election night that saw Donald Trump win the U.S. presidency for a second time, Vice President Kamala Harris officially conceded the race on Wednesday afternoon, closing the book on one of the most chaotic presidential cycles in recent history. As we discussed on yesterday's program, Harris was conspicuously silent in the immediate aftermath of Trump's victory, opting not to speak to her supporters on election night. But she emerged Wednesday afternoon with a call to Trump to formally concede defeat. During the phone call, Harris reportedly congratulated Trump on his performance Tuesday night, which saw him capture both the Electoral College and popular vote, and discussed the importance of a peaceful transfer of power. According to a senior Harris aide, she also urged Trump to be a president for everyone in the country, regardless of party, now that the contentious campaign is behind them. That, of course, comes from the candidate of the party that called anyone voting for Trump racist, sexist, unintelligent, or unconcerned about women. So perhaps it rings a little hollow. For his part, Trump reportedly agreed with her sentiments. A spokesman for the Trump campaign said, quote, President Trump acknowledged Vice President Harris on her strength, professionalism, and tenacity throughout the campaign, and both leaders agreed on the importance of unifying the country, end quote. Now, later in the evening, Harris delivered her concession speech to her supporters at her alma mater, Howard University, which echoed the sentiments reportedly of her call with Trump. Harris told her supporters, quote, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States and loyalty to our conscience and our God. My allegiance to all three is why I'm here to say, while I concede the election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign, end quote. She said that while she knows her supporters are feeling a range of emotions in the aftermath of Tuesday's vote, Harris stressed, quote, we must accept the results of this election, saying that it is what distinguishes democracy from monarchy and tyranny. Thanking her supporters for the trust they placed in her, the vice president continued, quote, the outcome of this election is not what we wanted, but hear me when I say the light of America's promise will always burn bright as long as we never give up, end quote. Now, Harris mentioned her call with Trump, drawing boos from the audience, well, that's to be expected, but said she was committed to working with his team to ensure a peaceful transition. She also encouraged her supporters to remain optimistic as America potentially enters what she described as a, quote, dark time. Oh, yes, well, that sounds super unifying on her part. Finally, the vice president vowed to continue advocating for her core campaign issues of reproductive rights, curbing gun violence, and protecting democracy, saying she will, quote, never give up the fight, end quote. All right, there we have it. Coming up after the break, Russia hints at a, quote, reset with the U.S. after Trump's win, and protests erupt in Israel following Defense Minister Gallant's dismissal by Prime Minister Netanyahu. I'll have those stories when we come back. Welcome back to the PDB. Sticking with the U.S. presidential election, as reactions continue to pour in from world leaders, notable figures within Russia are floating the possibility of a diplomatic reset with the U.S., although Russian President Putin is remaining quiet. As we discussed on yesterday's show, the Kremlin has been cautious in their official reaction to Donald Trump's victory on Tuesday, with officials saying Putin has no immediate plans to congratulate the president-elect on his victory. Instead, a spokesman for the Kremlin noted that the U.S. was still a, quote, hostile country and expressed skepticism at Trump's stated claims that he can bring about an end to Russia's war in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters, quote, "I'm not aware of the president's plans to congratulate Trump on his election. Let's not forget that we are talking about an unfriendly country that is directly and indirectly involved in a war against our state," end quote. He added, "And let's not forget that Putin and his band of thugs started this war," end quote. All right, I made up that last bit of that quote, but that frankly doesn't make me wrong. Peskov also bemoaned the state. Oh, I hate when the Kremlin bemoans anything. Peskov bemoaned the state of Russia-U.S. relations, saying it is, quote, practically impossible to worsen things further. He added that the Kremlin would have to wait and see what Trump brings to the table when he retakes the presidency in January. But some notable Russian elites appeared more encouraged by the election outcome, suggesting Trump's victory offers them an opportunity to, quote, reset diplomatic relations with the U.S. They reportedly feel that a second Trump presidency will have a negative impact on Ukraine, given Republican skepticism to continued military and financial aid for Kyiv and Trump's pledge to put American interests first when it comes to foreign policy. According to a report from NBC News, they also think that Trump might pressure Ukrainian leaders into peace talks with Russia, something critics of the president-elect fear will favor the interests of Putin and could lead to territorial concessions for Ukraine. Dmitry Medvedev, who served as Russia's president between 2008 and 2012 and prime minister between 2012 and 2020, called Trump, quote, useful to us, implying Trump would attempt to cut off funding to Ukraine. Now, it's worth noting that Medvedev is a chief proponent of disinformation and misinformation, so anything he says should be considered about as useful as side pockets on a cow. Medvedev, who currently serves as deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, said, quote, Trump has one quality that is useful to us. As a businessman to the core, he mortally dislikes spending money on various hangers-on and freeloaders. The question is how much they will force Trump to give for the war, end quote. Now, as mentioned before, it's also worth noting that Putin only moved on Crimea back in 2014 during the Obama administration and invaded Ukraine during the Biden administration. And lethal aid to Ukraine was actually first authorized by the Trump administration. My point being, don't believe anything coming from the Kremlin. Kirill Dmitriev, the head of Russia's sovereign wealth fund, also chimed in on the results, using it as an opportunity to stir the pot. He said that Trump's, quote, convincing victory shows that ordinary Americans are tired of the unprecedented lies, incompetence, and malice of the Biden administration. He said this opens up new opportunities for resetting relations between Russia and the United States, end quote. Again, it's important to consider the source of these comments. It's hard to know where things will go under a second Trump administration, and despite his current silence, Putin is likely to weigh in sooner rather than later. What is clear is that senior Russian officials think they have an opportunity to redefine the current status quo in Eastern Europe during a second Trump term. On the Ukrainian side, President Zelensky was quick to congratulate Trump on his victory, saying he admires Trump's, quote, commitment to the peace-through-strength approach in global affairs, calling it, quote, exactly the principle that can practically bring just peace in Ukraine closer, end quote. He said he has had productive talks in recent months with Trump on how to curb Russian aggression and expressed optimism that he'll be able to work with Trump to put those plans into action. All right, I want to shift your attention to Israel now, where thousands of Israelis protested in Jerusalem for a second consecutive night, pressing Prime Minister Netanyahu to reverse his decision to fire Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. As we reported on Wednesday's PDB, Gallant's firing followed his long-standing criticism of Netanyahu's policies. Gallant voiced concerns over three issues: the lack of a full inquiry into the 7 October terror attack, divisive legislation granting draft exemptions to ultra-Orthodox youth, and Israel's handling of the Hamas hostage crisis. Each of these issues struck a nerve with Israelis, prompting thousands to gather in a powerful display of dissent near the Knesset, that's Israel's parliament, calling for Netanyahu to reinstate Gallant and address the pressing national concerns he raised. Protests also erupted in Tel Aviv, where demonstrators blocked highways, marking one of the largest displays of opposition to Netanyahu's government in recent years. This wave of dissent underscores a deepening rift between Netanyahu's administration and the public. The unrest coincided with Netanyahu appointing Israel Katz as the new defense minister, and that's a decision that many view as Netanyahu reinforcing his hardline stance during increasing internal dissent. So, you ask yourself, who is Katz? For starters, Katz is a long-standing Likud member and a prominent figure in politics since his entry into the Knesset in 1998. Katz is known for his uncompromising style, earning him the nickname the Bulldozer. Unlike Gallant, Katz's unwavering loyalty to Netanyahu aligns tightly with the Prime Minister's security goals, making him an ideal fit for Netanyahu's vision. Where Gallant raised public doubts, Katz's approach represents, steadfast allegiance. Katz has held several roles in Netanyahu's cabinets, including transport, energy, finance, and most recently, foreign minister. With extensive experience across various ministries, he is expected to bring political savvy and fierce loyalty to his new post as defense minister. In his first statement as defense minister, Katz pledged to return all hostages held by Hamas, referring to the goal as, quote, the most important moral mission. Katz further emphasized plans to dismantle Hamas's capabilities in Gaza, defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon, if necessary, and counter Iran's growing influence in the region. While Katz lacks military experience, his loyalty to Netanyahu and shared security priorities made him the odds-on favorite for the role. Aviv Bushinsky, Netanyahu's former chief of staff, anticipates Katz will defer to Netanyahu's strategic direction, fostering greater cohesion within the cabinet during these difficult times. It's important to note that critics worry Katz's lack of military experience could present risks at a time when Israel faces escalating regional threats, arguing that the defense ministry would benefit from more seasoned military insight. There are also concerns about his aggressive approach to foreign affairs. Internationally, the Bulldozer has made headlines for hardline diplomacy, notably declaring UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, quote, persona non grata in October over remarks critical of Israeli actions in Gaza. As Israel continues its military operations in Gaza and confrontation with Hezbollah on its northern front, Katz's appointment marks a pivotal transition in Israel's leadership ranks, one that prioritizes loyalty and alignment over traditional military experience. All right, up next, the Mexican Navy intercepts a massive 3.6-ton cocaine haul aboard a narco sub spotted some 153 miles off Acapulco's coast. We'll have the details in today's Back of the Brief. I'll be right back. In today's Back of the Brief, the Mexican Navy has made a major drug bust, seizing 3.6 tons, or that's roughly 8,000 pounds, of cocaine from a semi-submersible narco sub, a mere 153 miles from the Pacific beaches of Acapulco. 3.6 tons of coke. Seriously, 8,000 pounds of coke. After spotting the narco sub earlier in the week, Mexican Navy ships moved in to capture it on Tuesday, detaining 9 crew members, 6 of whom were foreign nationals. Although the Navy didn't disclose their nationalities, previous seizures revealed Colombian and Venezuelan nationals often crew these vessels. These go-fast semi-submersibles, known as narco subs, are a favorite for drug traffickers. I mean, who doesn't love a narco sub? Cleverly designed to dodge law enforcement. Powered by 2 outboard motors and staying just above the water, they're built, of course, to slip underneath the radar. Mexican authorities shared images of the seized cocaine packed into 102 packages, flanked by naval ships. The bust is one in a recent wave of major drug seizures by Mexican authorities, including high-speed chases on the open sea that have been captured on video, showcasing the intensity of these operations. Just weeks prior, the Navy captured a record 8.3 tons of drugs in a single raid in the Pacific involving 6 cartel vessels, including another narco sub. How many narco subs are there? That held about 4,800 pounds of cocaine. Altogether, over 16 tons of drugs have been seized at sea since Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum took office in October. Underscoring the country's renewed focus on intercepting drug trafficking at its source. But Mexico isn't alone in this fight. In September, the United States Coast Guard offloaded $54 million in cocaine, including over 1,200 pounds seized from a narco sub. Across the region, countries are ramping up interdiction efforts. Colombian authorities regularly seize these semi-submersibles in their waters before they head for the U.S., for Central America, and for Europe. Earlier this summer, the Colombian Navy intercepted 2 additional narco subs loaded with nearly 5 tons of cocaine along the Pacific coast. The Mexican Navy's latest seizure reflects a broader commitment to curbing the flow of cocaine and other narcotics trafficked throughout the Pacific, particularly as cartels intensify their efforts to flood the region with drugs. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, 7 November. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And of course, to listen to the show ad-free, well, it's relatively simple. You just become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I told you it was relatively simple. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.